Security Officer Kim Tae-ho felt his stomach drop as the transport shuttle touched down on Nexus Station. Through the small porthole, he could see the massive structure stretching endlessly in all directions. This wasn't just any space station. This was the heart of galactic trade, where billions of credits changed hands every day and where representatives from dozens of alien species conducted business that shaped entire star systems. Tae-ho adjusted his crisp new uniform one last time before stepping through the airlock. The moment his boots hit the station's polished floor, conversation stopped. Aliens of every shape and size turned to stare at him. Some had multiple eyes that blinked in sequence, others had skin that shifted colors like mood rings, and a few floated rather than walked. But they all had one thing in common. They were looking at him like he was some kind of curiosity in a museum. He had trained for this moment for 2 years on Earth, learning alien languages and customs, studying galactic law, and preparing to become the first human ever assigned to interstellar police work. The Galactic Confederation had finally agreed to let humans join their law enforcement after decades of negotiations. Earth's leaders saw it as a huge step forward. But standing here now, surrounded by beings whose technology made human achievements look like stone tools, Tae-ho wondered if he was in over his head. Station Commander Velthar approached him with long, graceful strides. The Aquilian stood nearly 8 feet tall with blue skin that seemed to shimmer like water in sunlight. His large, dark eyes regarded Tae-ho with what could only be described as barely hidden annoyance. When Velthar spoke, his voice came through a small translation device clipped to his collar. "So you are the human the Confederation insisted we accept," Velthar said, his tone making it clear this wasn't his idea. "I suppose we have no choice in the matter. Just try not to interfere with our established procedures. We have been maintaining order on this station for over 2 centuries without human assistance." Tae-ho straightened his shoulders. "I'm here to learn and help however I can, Commander." "Yes, well?" Velthar clicked his tongue against his teeth, a sound that didn't translate well. "Your quarters are in Section C7. Report to Detective First Class Korthel tomorrow at 0800 station time. He will show you how we do things here." As Velthar walked away, Tae-ho couldn't shake the feeling that he was already being written off as a failure. He spent the rest of the day exploring the station, marveling at the advanced technology that seemed to anticipate every need. Doors opened before he approached them, elevators knew his destination before he spoke, and environmental systems adjusted the air temperature and humidity to perfectly suit human comfort the moment he entered any room. Everything ran with clockwork precision. Security drones patrolled silently through the corridors, their sensors constantly scanning for any sign of trouble. The station's artificial intelligence monitored thousands of cameras, analyzed millions of data points every second, and could supposedly predict criminal activity before it happened. It was impressive, almost magical to someone from a world where the most advanced security system was still a guard dog and a chain-link fence. But Tae-ho's amazement was short-lived. 6 hours after his arrival, alarms began blaring throughout the merchant district. He was grabbing dinner at a food court when the chaos erupted. Alien security officers rushed past him, their translation devices crackling with urgent communications he couldn't fully understand. Following the commotion, Tae-ho found himself outside 3 of the station's most secure vaults. These weren't ordinary storage units. They were high-tech fortresses designed to protect the most valuable cargo in the galaxy. Each vault had multiple layers of security: biometric scanners, quantum locks, gravity field generators, and AI-controlled defensive systems that could supposedly stop anything short of a small army. Yet somehow all 3 had been broken into, at exactly the same time. The contents, rare crystals worth millions of credits, ancient artifacts from dead civilizations, and prototype technology that could change the balance of power between star systems, had simply vanished. Detective First Class Korthel stood in the center of the crime scene, waving a device that looked like a cross between a telescope and a magic wand. His species, the Aquilians, were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical minds and advanced investigative techniques. Korthel's scanner could detect molecular traces, analyze energy patterns, and even identify the emotional state of anyone who had been in the area within the past week. "This is impossible," Korthul muttered, his forearms working frantically to adjust different settings on his equipment. "Our system should have detected any known method of entry. The AI shows no anomalies in any of the security networks. There are no energy signatures, no molecular traces, no quantum disturbances. It's as if the thieves simply appeared inside the vaults, took what they wanted, and vanished into thin air." Other Aquilian investigators nodded in agreement, their own scanners producing similar results. To them, if their technology couldn't detect something, it might as well not exist. They had grown so accustomed to their advanced tools that they had forgotten how to investigate crimes the old-fashioned way. But Taeho approached the nearest vault door and knelt down beside it. While the aliens focused on their screens and readouts, he used something much more basic: his eyes. Running his fingers along the doorframe, he felt something the scanners had missed. There were tiny scratches in the metal, so small they were almost invisible. But to human eyes, evolved over millions of years to spot the subtle signs that meant the difference between life and death on a dangerous world, they were as obvious as neon signs. "What about unknown methods?" Taeho asked, pointing to the scratches. The alien investigators looked at him with expressions that clearly said they thought he was wasting everyone's time. The next morning, Taeho watched the Aquilian investigation team work with fascination and growing frustration. They had turned the crime scene into something that looked like a high-tech laboratory. Dozens of sophisticated machines hummed and beeped as they processed data, analyzed samples, and ran complex calculations that would have taken human computers weeks to complete. Detective Korthul stood at the center of it all, his forearms dancing across multiple control panels simultaneously. Streams of data flowed across holographic displays, showing everything from atmospheric composition to quantum field fluctuations. The other investigators fed information into their predictive crime algorithms, hoping their artificial intelligence could solve what their sensors couldn't detect. "The probability matrices are clear," announced Detective Zilveth, another Aquilian with silver markings across her blue skin. "Based on historical crime patterns and current security protocols, there is a 97.3% chance the perpetrators used some form of dimensional phase-shifting technology." "Agreed." Korthul nodded, manipulating a three-dimensional crime scene reconstruction. "We should focus our investigation on species known to possess such capabilities. The Krethani Collective has been developing phase technology, and the Vorthan Empire has made significant advances in molecular displacement." While his colleagues buried themselves in data and theories, Taeho decided to take a different approach. He left the crime scene and began walking through the station's corridors, using nothing more advanced than his own eyes and ears. To the aliens, this seemed incredibly primitive, like trying to perform surgery with stone tools. But Taeho had something they didn't: millions of years of human evolution that had taught his species to read danger in the smallest details. As he walked through the merchant district, Taeho noticed things the advanced sensors had missed. A Tenthari trader who normally made eye contact with everyone suddenly looked at the floor whenever security officers passed by. His tentacles, which usually swayed gently with contentment, now moved in short, nervous jerks. The alien's skin had shifted from its normal peaceful green to a slightly yellowish tinge that suggested anxiety. In another section, Taeho observed how the security guards had subtly changed their patrol routes. Instead of following their usual random patterns, they were avoiding certain areas at specific times. It wasn't obvious enough to trigger the AI systems, but to human eyes trained to spot predator behavior, it was as clear as a flashing warning sign. The cleaning staff also caught his attention. These were usually the most invisible beings on the station, maintenance workers from various species who kept the massive structure running smoothly. But in the hours before and after the thefts, several cleaning crews had moved through restricted areas with unusual urgency. They carried the same equipment as always, but their body language screamed that they were doing more than just cleaning. When Taeho returned to the investigation briefing, Korthul was explaining their latest findings to Commander Velthar. Charts and graphs filled the air, showing complex patterns that the AI had identified in the stolen goods. "Your primitive observation methods are inefficient," Korthul told Tejo without looking up from his data screens. We have sensors that can detect deception through biochemical analysis. Our equipment can identify stress hormones, measure heart rate variations, and even analyze brainwave patterns. If someone is lying, we know about it before they finish speaking. Tejo nodded politely, but then asked a question that made the alien detective pause. But can they detect someone who isn't technically lying? What do you mean? Korthul's large eyes blinked in confusion. What if someone believes what they're saying is true even when it's not? What if they've been fed false information? What if they're telling the truth about one thing while hiding something completely different? Tejo pulled up security footage. On his personal tablet, images that the aliens had dismissed as irrelevant background noise. The footage showed the same corridors and spaces as always, filled with the usual mix of traders, travelers, and station personnel. To the Aquilian investigators, it was just routine surveillance data with no obvious anomalies. Their AI systems had analyzed every frame and found nothing worth investigating, but Tejo saw something different. His pattern recognition abilities, sharpened by countless generations of human ancestors who had to spot camouflaged predators or identify safe paths through dangerous terrain, picked up details that the advanced technology missed completely. Look at this section here, he said, pointing to a seemingly normal corridor scene. This Vorthon merchant walks this route every day at the same time, but 3 days ago, he changed his path by exactly 47 seconds. Yesterday, a cleaning crew finished their work in this area 32 seconds earlier than usual. And today, the security patrol arrived 18 seconds later than scheduled. Korthul looked at the timestamps Tejo had highlighted. Those are tiny variations. Well, within normal parameters, our systems don't flag anything less than a 5-minute deviation as significant. Exactly, Tejo said. Whoever planned this knew exactly how your systems think. They knew that small changes wouldn't trigger your alarms, but when you add up all these tiny variations across dozens of people over several days, you get perfect timing for a coordinated theft. The human detective began mapping the crimes differently than his alien colleagues. Instead of looking for technological signatures or energy patterns, he focused on human behavioral patterns that remained consistent across species: fear, greed, nervousness, excitement. These emotions showed up in body language and movement patterns that were older than any technology. He created a timeline not of data points and quantum signatures, but of nervous glances, changed routines, and subtle behavioral shifts. What emerged was a picture of a conspiracy that involved someone with intimate knowledge of station procedures, someone who understood exactly how the alien security systems operated and, more importantly, how they could be fooled. The thefts weren't the work of advanced technology or alien supercriminals. They were the result of old-fashioned inside knowledge combined with an understanding that sometimes the most sophisticated systems could be beaten by simply being too small to notice. As Tejo continued his investigation, he realized he was dealing with someone who thought like a human, someone who understood that the best way to hide was often in plain sight. Following his instincts, Tejo found himself descending deeper into Nexus Station than he had ever been before. The polished corridors and gleaming surfaces of the upper levels gave way to functional metal walkways and exposed piping. This was the station's maintenance level, where the real work of keeping millions of beings alive in the vacuum of space happened every day. The air here was different, thicker with the smell of recycled atmosphere and industrial lubricants. Massive machines hummed constantly, processing waste, generating power, and maintaining the artificial gravity that kept everyone's feet on the ground. Steam hissed from pipe joints, and the lighting was dimmer, more yellow than the bright white illumination of the commercial districts above. Tejo had expected to find only maintenance workers and automated systems down here. What he discovered instead amazed him. Hidden in the spaces between massive air recyclers and behind enormous water purification tanks was an entire community that the station's official records didn't acknowledge existed. These weren't criminals or dangerous fugitives. They were refugees, outcasts, and beings who had fallen through the cracks of galactic society. Some were former soldiers from wars that had ended decades ago, still wearing bits and pieces of old uniforms. Others were traders who had lost everything to pirates or market crashes and couldn't afford passage to anywhere else. A few were simply members of species that weren't officially recognized by the Galactic Confederation, making them invisible to most bureaucratic systems. They had built their own small society in the forgotten spaces of the station, makeshift. Homes constructed from salvaged materials hugged the walls between major machinery. Gardens grew under improvised lighting systems, providing fresh food that supplemented whatever they could earn from odd jobs or find in the upper levels' waste systems. It was poverty, but it was also community. Beings from dozens of different worlds helping each other survive in a place that had forgotten they existed. What struck Tejo most was how the station's advanced surveillance systems had completely missed this entire population. The AI systems were programmed to monitor the official areas of the station, the places where registered beings lived and worked. Down here in the maintenance levels, the cameras were focused on equipment status, not people. The sensors tracked temperature and pressure readings, not life signs. It was the perfect blind spot in an otherwise perfectly monitored environment. As Tejo explored this hidden world, he became aware that he was being watched. Conversations stopped when he approached, and beings melted into the shadows between machines. His security uniform marked him as part of the system that ignored them, and trust would not come easily. But then an elderly Myran female approached him cautiously. Yolthes was ancient even by her species' standards, her gray skin wrinkled, like old leather, and her breathing assisted by a device that wheezed with each inhalation. She moved slowly, leaning heavily on a walking stick made from what looked like a piece of discarded piping. "You're the human?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We heard about you up there. They say you see things differently than the blue ones." Tejo knelt down so he was at her eye level, a gesture of respect that clearly surprised her. "What things do you see down here that others miss?" Yolthes studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he could be trusted. Finally, she gestured for him to follow her deeper into the maze of machinery. They walked in silence past water recyclers the size of buildings, and power generators that could have provided electricity for an entire city on Earth. "The ones who come and go through the old transport tubes," she finally explained, pointing to a section of the ceiling where large pipes ran alongside what looked like abandoned passenger corridors. "Station officials who think we're too stupid to notice their business. But we see everything down here. We have to. It's how we survive." She led him to a makeshift platform constructed between two massive air processing units. From here, they could see into one of the old transport tunnels that had been abandoned when the station upgraded its systems decades ago. The official records probably listed these passages as sealed and unused, but Yolthes showed him evidence that they were anything but abandoned. "They come through here at night," she continued, her breathing apparatus hissing softly. "Always. The same ones. Security officers, administrators, even some of the Merchant Guild representatives. They carry cases and boxes, always heading toward the old cargo bays that connect to the shipping channels. Other beings had gathered around them now, their initial fear replaced by curiosity. A young Kethani male with scales that shifted from blue to green spoke up. "We've been watching them for cycles. They meet with ships that aren't in the official docking records, loading and unloading cargo that never goes through customs." An elderly Vorthak, his tusks yellowed with age, added his own observations. "They've been stealing from the merchants for a long time, taking things from the high-security vaults and selling them to weapon makers in the Outer Rim territories, places where the Confederation doesn't ask too many questions about where merchandise comes from." As more of the underground dwellers shared their stories, Tejo began to understand the scope of what he was dealing with. This wasn't just a simple theft. It was a systematic operation that had been running for years. The perpetrators weren't using advanced technology to break into the vaults. They were using their positions of authority to simply walk in and take whatever they wanted. The station's advanced AI systems were designed to detect external threats, unauthorized access, and unusual energy signatures. But they weren't programmed to suspect the very people who were supposed to be protecting the station. Security officers had legitimate access to restricted areas. Administrators could authorize unusual cargo movements. Merchant Guild representatives could request special handling for valuable items. "Why haven't you reported this?" Tejo asked. Yolthus laughed bitterly. "To whom? The same officials who are doing the stealing? We tried years ago. Filed complaints, submitted evidence, even recorded some of their meetings. But who listens to people who don't officially exist? The system says we're not here, so our testimony doesn't matter." The underground community had witnessed everything because they were invisible to the very systems designed to maintain order on the station. Their testimonies painted a picture of corruption that reached into the highest levels of station management. Corruption that had gone undetected precisely because those in charge never thought to look down into the forgotten spaces where the real witnesses lived. Tejo realized that his investigation had led him to the one place where the truth had been hiding all along, among the people society had chosen to ignore. Over the next several days, Tejo spent every free moment in the maintenance levels, carefully documenting everything the underground community had witnessed. He used his personal recording device to capture their testimonies, knowing that without solid evidence, no one would believe accusations against high-ranking station officials. The picture that emerged was far worse than he had initially suspected. This wasn't just about the recent vault thefts. Those were merely the latest incidents in a criminal operation that had been running for over 3 years. The underground dwellers had watched as a network of corrupt officials systematically looted the station's most valuable cargo, selling everything from rare minerals needed for starship engines to ancient artifacts that were supposed to be preserved in galactic museums. Yolthus had kept detailed records in her own way, using a system of marks and symbols carved into metal scraps that meant nothing to the station's scanning systems, but told a complete story to anyone who knew how to read them. Her makeshift calendar showed the dates and times of suspicious meetings, the officials involved, and even rough descriptions of what they had seen being moved through the old transport tunnels. "This Deputy Administrator Korthvak," she explained, pointing to a series of marks. "He comes every 10th cycle, always with the same case. Heavy, from the way he carries it. Always meets with the same ship captain in Bay 47C. A young Zelanti refugee named Paxthor had actually managed to follow some of the smugglers to their meeting points. His species was naturally quiet and could move through shadows almost invisibly, skills that had helped him survive on the dangerous streets of his home world before the war forced him to flee. They have buyers waiting in the Outer Rim territories," Paxthor explained in his soft musical voice. "Weapon manufacturers who don't ask questions about where their materials come from. Private collectors who pay premium prices for artifacts they're not supposed to own. Even some military contractors who need rare elements for experimental projects." The more Tejo learned, the clearer it became that the thieves weren't breaking into anything. The security systems weren't being hacked or bypassed. They were being used exactly as designed. The corrupt officials had legitimate access to the vaults, authorized transportation routes, and the ability to modify shipping records. They were stealing in plain sight, using their positions of trust to commit crimes that the station's AI systems couldn't detect because technically, nothing they were doing appeared illegal in the computer records. Deputy Administrator Korthvak could authorize special handling for sensitive cargo. Security Chief Mordeth could override vault access protocols for maintenance or inspection purposes. Shipping Coordinator Velthan could modify transport schedules and routing information. When they worked together, they could move anything they wanted, anywhere they wanted, without triggering a single alarm. The advanced AI systems that the aliens were so proud of had a fundamental flaw that the criminals understood perfectly. The computers could detect technical breaches and unauthorized access, but they couldn't recognize corruption when it came from authorized users following apparently legitimate procedures. Armed with witness statements, recorded evidence, and a detailed timeline of the criminal activities, Tejo knew he had to take his findings to Commander Velthar. But as he prepared his report, a nagging worry grew in the back of his mind. The corruption seemed to reach high into station management. How high did it actually go? The meeting with Velthar took place in the commander's private office, a luxurious space that overlooked the main commercial district. Holographic displays showed real-time station statistics and the walls were decorated with awards and commendations from various galactic organizations. It was the office of someone who had built a distinguished career in law enforcement. Tae-ho presented his evidence carefully, showing the recorded testimonies, the timeline of suspicious activities, and the physical evidence he had gathered. He explained how the underground community had witnessed years of systematic theft, and how the criminals were using their official positions to circumvent the very security systems they were supposed to protect. Velthar listened in silence, his large Aquilian eyes never leaving Tae-ho's face. When the presentation was finished, the commander leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "These are very serious accusations, human," Velthar finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "You're suggesting that some of our most trusted officials are criminals, that our security systems have been compromised from within, that our entire law enforcement structure has failed to detect ongoing criminal activity." "The evidence speaks for itself," Tae-ho replied, though something in the commander's tone made him uneasy. "Evidence from beings who don't officially exist on this station," Velthar continued. "Testimony from refugees and outcasts who might have their own reasons to make false accusations against station authorities. Physical evidence that could have been planted or misinterpreted." Tae-ho felt his heart sink as he realized what was happening. "Commander, with respect, the evidence is solid. The patterns are clear. These crimes have been happening for years." Velthar stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the bustling commercial district below. "Perhaps the pressure of your new assignment has affected your judgment," he said without turning around. "You're the first human in galactic law enforcement. That's a heavy burden. It would be understandable if the stress caused you to see conspiracies where none exist." "This isn't stress or imagination," Tae-ho insisted. "These crimes are real and they're ongoing. If we don't act now, they'll continue." "I think you need some rest," Velthar said, finally turning back to face him. "Take a few days off. Consider whether you might have misinterpreted what you've seen. When you're feeling better, we can discuss transferring you to a less demanding assignment." Tae-ho left the meeting with a sick feeling in his stomach. Velthar's reaction had confirmed his worst suspicions. The corruption reached all the way to the top of station security. The commander wasn't just dismissing the evidence, he was actively protecting the criminals. That night, Tae-ho sat in his quarters reviewing his recordings and trying to decide what to do next. His human instincts, sharpened by millions of years of evolution on a dangerous world, screamed that he was in serious trouble. The paranoia that his alien colleagues found so distasteful now seemed perfectly justified. Those same survival instincts had led him to install personal recording devices throughout his living space when he first arrived on the station. It was a precaution that most aliens would have considered unnecessary and slightly insulting. But humans had learned long ago that trust was a luxury they couldn't always afford. At Aero 347 station time, the atmospheric recycling system in Tae-ho's quarters malfunctioned. What should have been a steady flow of breathable air became a mixture that was slowly replacing oxygen with industrial gases. It was the kind of accident that happened occasionally on space stations. Life support systems were complex, and sometimes they failed. But Tae-ho's recording devices captured everything. The malfunction wasn't random. Someone had remotely accessed the environmental controls and deliberately altered the gas mixture in his quarters. If he hadn't woken up when he did, if he hadn't noticed the strange smell and immediately called for emergency maintenance, he would have suffocated in his sleep. The murder attempt had been designed to look like an accident, but the recordings proved it was deliberate sabotage. Someone wanted him dead, and they had the access codes and technical knowledge to nearly pull it off. As emergency teams worked to repair his life support system, Tae-ho realized that his investigation had put him in mortal danger. The corruption on Nexus Station wasn't just about theft, it was about people who were willing to kill to protect their criminal empire. After the attempt on his life, Tae-ho knew he was running out of time. The corrupt officials would try again, and next time they might succeed. He couldn't trust the normal chain of command, couldn't rely on the station's official communication systems, and couldn't even be sure which of his colleagues were involved in the conspiracy. He was completely alone, surrounded by enemies who had every advantage except one. They thought like aliens, and he thought like a human. The next morning, Tejo didn't report to his assigned duties. Instead, he began moving through the station like a ghost, using his human adaptability to stay one step ahead of anyone trying to track him. While the aliens relied on their sophisticated monitoring systems to locate people, Tejo used simple tricks that their technology couldn't detect. He changed clothes frequently, borrowing outfits from the underground community that made him look like a maintenance worker or cargo handler. He altered his walking pattern and posture, knowing that the station's AI systems used gait recognition to identify individuals. He even used makeup techniques he had learned in training to change the shape of his face, just enough to confuse facial recognition scanners. Most importantly, he stayed in the blind spots that he had discovered during his investigation. The maintenance levels, the old transport tunnels, the spaces between major systems where the surveillance cameras couldn't see. These became his highways through the station. The underground dwellers helped him move unseen, guiding him through paths that only they knew existed. While his enemies used the station's advanced communication networks to coordinate their search for him, Tejo was preparing something they would never expect. Deep in the bowels of the station, in a forgotten maintenance room filled with obsolete equipment, he found exactly what he was looking for: the old emergency broadcast system. This was technology from the station's early days, installed decades ago when Nexus Station was first constructed. It was simple, crude by current standards, and had been superseded by more advanced communication systems long ago. The sophisticated aliens who ran the station probably didn't even remember it existed. But it still worked. And more importantly, it was connected to every screen, speaker, and display device on the entire station. The emergency broadcast system had been designed for catastrophic situations, times when the station's main computers might be damaged and normal communication channels might be down. It was built to be independent, reliable, and impossible to shut down quickly. Most importantly for Tejo's purposes, it was so old and simple that the conspirators had never thought to monitor or control it. Working through the night, Tejo prepared his evidence transmission. He compiled all the recordings he had made, the testimonies from the underground community, the timeline of criminal activities, and the proof that someone had tried to kill him. He organized everything into a clear, undeniable presentation that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. But Tejo didn't just prepare a report. He crafted a story that would resonate with beings across the galaxy. He showed how the advanced technology that everyone trusted had been turned against them. He demonstrated how the very systems designed to protect them had become tools for exploitation. Most importantly, he proved that the solution to high-tech crime sometimes required low-tech thinking. At 800 station time, during the peak of the morning shift change when the maximum number of beings would be present on the station, Tejo activated the emergency broadcast system. Alarms began sounding throughout Nexus Station, and every screen displayed the same message: critical security alert, evidence of systematic corruption. Within seconds, Tejo's evidence was playing on thousands of displays simultaneously. Merchants in the commercial district stopped their negotiations to watch. Travelers waiting for transport connections gathered around public screens. Security officers found their own monitoring displays hijacked by the broadcast. Even the underground community, huddled around improvised screens in the maintenance levels, watched as their testimonies were finally heard by the wider galaxy. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The recordings showed station officials moving stolen goods through abandoned tunnels. The testimonies from the underground dwellers provided dates, times, and detailed descriptions of criminal activities. The documentation of the attempt on Tejo's life proved that the conspirators were willing to commit murder to protect their operation. Commander Velthar tried to shut down the broadcast, but the old emergency system was designed to be tamper-proof. He attempted to dismiss the evidence as fabricated, but too many witnesses had seen too much for his denials to be credible. Within hours, emergency investigators from the Galactic Confederation were demanding access to the station. The revelation sent shockwaves throughout galactic society. Nexus Station wasn't just any trading post. It was the heart of interstellar commerce, a place that billions of beings trusted with their most valuable possessions. If corruption could flourish there undetected for years, what did that say about the security of the entire galactic community? News of the scandal spread faster than light through the galactic communication networks. Other stations began reviewing their own security procedures, terrified that they might have similar problems. Trading partners demanded investigations of their shipping records. The Galactic Confederation faced a crisis of confidence that threatened the foundation of interstellar commerce. But alongside the shock and concern came something else: amazement at how the crimes had been uncovered. The galaxy's most advanced security systems had been fooled for years, but a single human, using primitive investigative techniques, had exposed the entire conspiracy in a matter of days. The Confederation's emergency response was swift and decisive. Within 48 hours, teams of investigators from multiple species had arrived on Nexus Station. The corrupt officials were arrested, their assets frozen, and their criminal network dismantled. The stolen goods were recovered and returned to their rightful owners. More importantly, the Confederation began implementing new security protocols that combined alien technology with human investigative methods. They established training programs that taught alien law enforcement officers to recognize behavioral patterns and trust their instincts alongside their technological tools. Tae-ho found himself at the center of this transformation. Instead of being transferred to a less demanding assignment, he was promoted to head the new Interspecies Security Initiative. His primitive human traits, his intuition, his skepticism, his ability to see patterns that computers missed, were now recognized as invaluable assets in maintaining galactic law and order. The underground community that had helped expose the corruption was officially recognized and provided with proper housing and employment opportunities. Their intimate knowledge of the station's hidden spaces made them invaluable as security consultants, and their testimonies led to the conviction of every member of the criminal conspiracy. As Tae-ho stood in his new office, looking out at the same commercial district where he had first felt so out of place, he reflected on what had changed. The aliens had learned that their most advanced technology was only as good as the beings who operated it. They had discovered that sometimes the most sophisticated solution was simply paying attention to what was right in front of them. But most importantly, they had realized that diversity in thinking was just as valuable as diversity in species. Human methods weren't primitive. They were different. And in a galaxy that had grown too comfortable with its technological superiority, that difference had made all the difference. The galaxy was a safer place because someone had been willing to trust his instincts, talk to the forgotten, and remember that the best security system was still a sharp human mind.